I learned how to improvise on piano for hours at a time. Here's everything I know about how I did it. First, let's start with what piano improvisation is. Piano improvisation is where you make music from scratch, straight from your head. No formal rehearsal, no sheet music, nothing. You just feel the music and the room, and then you turn it into a song on piano. For me, I find that it often involves guessing and experimentation, which is the fun of it. Plus, I've gotten so many compliments from people saying how calming my piano improvs are. I'll tell you everything I know about how I learned to improvise to help you improve. Why should you learn how to improvise on piano? I've been improvising for at least 5 to 7 years at this point. Learning to improvise has allowed me to create the music I felt in my soul whenever I had a piano around me. I could vent off emotions or just allow the time to pass. Additionally, it unknowingly taught me more about music theory through infusion. Just by experimenting with what chords sounded cool and how different chords elicited different emotions, I was able to pick these tools out of my toolbox whenever I felt they were needed. Also, as I continued to learn how to improvise, I noticed that my music ear improved as well. I began to be able to play my favorite songs just by listening to the relationships of the notes. I could do this without chord charts or sheet music. I'm able to capture the essence of songs I listen to that don't have crazy key changes in between and recreate them with my own twist. And I believe these can help you get started with improvising your very first songs. Choose a key. My favorite keys to start with were the ones with the fewest black keys, like C major or A minor, G major or E minor, and D major or B minor. The G major and E minor keys are still my go-to scales to this day. It doesn't really matter which one you start with, but it's a good idea to have experience with all of them at some point. Next, it's good to experiment. What I mean by that is to try different chords without looking at chord charts to learn the sound relationships between them. I often did this subconsciously because I was so curious about how pop songs and worship songs got that beautiful minor sound. After my research from about 10 seconds ago, that is technically called the minor sixth. I first started with 2-note chords, which kept me occupied for a while. Eventually, I began incorporating triads, which are 3-note chords, into my songs as well. There were a lot of wrong sounding notes, and there still are, but once I figured it out, it was like I conquered a mountain. Play some of your favorite songs by ear. Christian music is pretty easy to figure out if you find the acoustic or studio versions. I played these and sang along. The benefit to learning to play some things by ear is that I never had to rely 100% on chord charts or sheet music. I can't sight read well anyway. Plus, playing by ear over time has allowed for me to be able to feel what the next note or chord should be without external instruction. This is very useful if you lose your spot. Plus, it can be a great confidence booster. Next, you're gonna wanna play different songs with the chord charts. I don't hate on chord charts. They're friggin' awesome. But there's a time and there's a place for them if you wanna learn how to improvise on piano. This is the time and the place. Play and sing along with the chord charts. I love Perfect by Ed Sheeran and Hello by Adele. Any songs that you hear on the radio or on a streaming service, you can probably find a chord chart for. My favorite site for these is Ultimate Guitar, where I can find 99% of the songs I want to play. Just make sure you use the chord chart and not the guitar tabs. That stuff's like gibberish. Finding the balance between using chord charts and not using chord charts is useful. Not using chord charts allows you to train your ears and your hands to know what comes next in your piano song flow based on what you've played. Using chord charts, though, allow you to discover new potential directions to go in your improvisations based on what you find in other songs. Next, it's time to add in some slightly more complicated techniques. After improvising songs by just trying chords, start experimenting with making your improvs a little more interesting. You can do this with broken chords and by adding filler notes in between the basic chords. Also, go ahead and add in octaves on your left hand. Octaves mean that it's the same note that you're playing with your pinky and your thumb, just up 8 notes on the keyboard. Doing this allowed me to up my game from noob to more river flows in you song vibes. This is a part of music theory which I'll mention more in a later point. Experiment with different time signatures and rhythms. I started out just improvising only in the 4/4 time signature, like the usual pop style. Eventually, I took a step out of the box to try 3/4 time, more waltz-like. The possibilities are endless. Since I'm a classically trained pianist, Beethoven, Mozart, those dudes are in there, I decided to add in some rhythm patterns I'd usually see in their music. This includes things like trills and arpeggios. Also, I'd recommend trying any unconventional methods that you hear in today's music. I don't know much about the jazz scene, but from the jazz music I've heard, it is the epitome of unconventional rhythm methods. Eventually, you'll learn how to feel where the rhythms fit in your improvisations. I know I did, and I'm still learning about new ones to this day. Try a key change. Especially in olden day gospel music, like the 1900s, key changes were common to add more energy and emotional power to songs. Experiment with these sometime in your improvisations as well. I find that key changes allow me to practice transposing, basically playing the same thing in another key. If it's a key I don't use often or at all, my note presses are so out of tune. But after some practice, I started to feel the chills. I don't really do key changes that often, but I still think that understanding them is a useful skill to have. Add chords outside your key into your song. Go wonky and try playing chords outside of your original key. Experiment with how to make them sound good in relation to the rest of the song. Again, this sounded so out of tune for me when I first started trying this, and honestly, I was scared of failure. My improvisation sounded so pretty and so perfect, and then I was going to intentionally ruin it with an off-key straggler. Yes, it hurt me when those off-key stragglers didn't work out, but guess what? I found quite a few that fit into the song's good-sounding piano notes community over time. It's worth it, I promise. You'll never know if you don't try new things like this. Do outside research about music theory. My next way to learn how to improvise on piano is to find answers from others who know way more about what they're talking about. I say this particularly for topics you want to learn. Halloween's coming up. Want to learn how to make a spooky sounding tune? Look up how to reflect that in your song on the interwebs. Want to play something nostalgic or sad? Look up the chords or the note relationships you need to elicit that response from the piano keys. I will caution though, don't rely on it to learn every single thing. It sounds safe, yes. However, I don't think that I would have become as proficient as I am with piano improvisation if I had always looked on the internet for every single answer. Improvise because you enjoy it. Learn how to get better at improvising because you enjoy it, not out of obligation. This is how I was able to spend hours upon hours improvising. I did this for years because I find it fun. Fun fact, I didn't even know what I was doing was called improvisation at the time. Next, improvise in front of other people. I used to do this in front of my parents, and they termed my improv music dishwasher music. I guess they thought it was calming as they did the house chores. I'll take it. Even if you do make mistakes in any field, there's something about getting out there and showing your progress and receiving feedback, whether verbal or not. Plus, I find that putting myself out there helps me to get out of my own head. It's like ripping the Band-Aid off of your misery. Notice that 85% of the ways I learned how to improvise came from experimentation and constant playing. This experimentation led to lots of mistakes, but these mistakes weren't always negative. Many of these mistakes sounded amazing, and I'm sure I've adopted them into my current piano improv technique today. In other words, most of my progress came from not being safe when it comes to music. Look forward to making mistakes or for your music to be sounding off. That's the fun of it! Now you've got a problem that you can solve. How can you make the transition to the next note sound like what it sounds like in your head? It may take like 10 tries, plus some frustration, plus giving up, plus some additional research, plus respectfully slamming your keyboard, but I am sure that you'll eventually find the notes you're looking for.